Okay, so I'm Lisa Hanson. I work in the Intermountain Regional Office. My background is archaeology. I was an archaeologist for about 17 years before I came over to fire and aviation, and for the last 10 years I've been working in the regional office in fire and aviation, doing compliance and planning for the Intermountain Regional parks. So that's my background in a nutshell. But I've had a very strong interest in the link between resource management and fire management through my whole career, whether I was as an archaeologist or coming over here to the regional office. So I think that was something that spurred me on to this READ program in the Intermountain region when I came over here. So my screen should be up now. I think you guys should be able to see this. We've heard a lot of really great information from Rich about the BEAR program, the what's and why's and how's for implementing several common treatments. And I'd like to change this up a little bit and present some administrative information that applies for both the Resource Advisor program and the BEAR program. The only caveat I have for this is that this is NPS specific, so if there's any non-NPS people listening in, or if you're going to transfer information to other people, just make sure that this is specific to NPS. So qualifications. This is kind of just a reminder for all of us that the technical specialist is like the umbrella that's put together from the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, NWCG, has put together this umbrella of technical specialists, and Resource Advisor and BEAR team members all fall within that, underneath that umbrella. And these technical specialists cover everything from like camp help to ologists who go on fires to some technical skills. So it's a broad-based category. The reason that NWCG has declined to define these positions under the THSP is because they believe that those are agency-specific skill sets that need to be tapped into. So you won't see a task book for a resource advisor or one of the BEAR positions, because what you would see in a lot of other common fire jobs. You won't see that because these THSP positions are agency specific. And the thing to remember with this is that you have this specialized skill set that's gained through, for Resource Advisor and BEAR at least, these are skill sets that are gained through educational degrees or industry training, and many of you have these skills in your day job as well as the fire positions that you're applying for. So it's really important to remember that these are professional positions. So just because someone is in a park and they say, hey, I really want to be a resource advisor, they have to have those skill sets obtained through other venues, through jobs or training or experiences. And that's kind of important because we need to make sure that the job is done at a professional level. And the thing to remember with this too is that you're the bridge between your home park unit and the incident command team that comes in. So you're representing the concerns from the park to the incident command team and helping them solve some of the problems for some of the challenges that will arise in managing these wildfires. I think I'm going to move on to this next one. We identify the personnel that have professional skills, basic firefighting training, and the ability to bring those professional skills into the fire incident environment. Again, you're the bridge between your resource management skills and your fire experience or training. So these are the mnemonics that will identify you. I don't want you to get too wrapped up with all of these different names. You can pick out probably 3 or 4 at least different mnemonics that you can put on your red card, and that's all in well. But what you really need to know is make sure that you have THSP identified on your red card. Make sure that you've identified your resource advisor or your burned area emergency specialist, which I'm going to get to in the next slide, and any other specific skills if you want to identify those. That's sort of just above and beyond. I have never done a name request for someone with a very, very specific, like a social science specialist or something like that. I've never done that. I always reach out to people as the THSP level or the READ or BEAR level. So make sure that you have those higher level mnemonics. You can add those other ones if you want to, but it's really important to make sure that you've got those higher level THSP in either READ or BAES. These are some more mnemonics for BEAR positions. I think that one of the questions that came up was what are the most common or most important or frequently requested skill sets in BEAR positions. Rich, you can chime in if you want to, but I think that it's probably hydrologists or soil scientists, because that's the substrate for everything. If you think about cultural resources, it all gets down to the soil. Is it erosional? Is it hydrophobic? Those are the things that all get down to the very basic level. And I think that the hydrologists, soil scientists, those positions are always well sought after. We do need those other specialists like cultural resource specialists, biologists, botanists especially, who have exotics, plants experience. Those things are important, but I almost every single BEAR team that I've seen includes hydrologists and or soil scientists to address that substrate. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit. So these are, if you are familiar with the Red Book, in Chapter 3, page 11, it identifies this list of things that you're required to do. And the reason I put this on here is just to remind you that this is there's a fair amount of commitment, time investment to stay current on your Red Card. These are things that some of them are things that you only have to deal with once. Some of them are recurring training that you need to do. Please do not burden your FPMA and your FMO to figure out if you have or have not had these trainings. Take responsibility of yourself. Make sure that you've got these trainings. These are all online things. None of them are things that you have to travel. So these are things that you can do at your home unit. I would say that it's probably a good idea to talk to your FMO and make sure they're on board with these trainings. These are all are required in the Red Book, but take responsibility of your own qualifications. This is pretty important. It's got everything from the HAZWOPER to discrimination and whistleblowing, which is probably necessary for your day job. Defensive driving, which is every 3 years. Aviation B3, which is every 3 years. If you have any anticipation that you're going to be on an aircraft, you have to do the B3 training. You're not supposed to be on that ship without that aviation training. And the last one I have listed on there is IS 700, which is a NIMS, Incident Management System training that was put in as a requirement last year. And I think last year the ROS system, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute, the ROS system was kicking people out who did not have IS 700. I could be wrong, but I think that's what I remember seeing. We have one brand new document, a reference document that just came out, and I threw a slide in just to add it. It's the Wildland Fire Incident Management Field Guide. It's It has a lot of common information that you find in your IRPG. You should be very familiar with your IRPG and using it frequently when you're on an incident assignment. The IRPG is primarily the initial responders tool, while the field guide is a standard reference guide. And the field guide is much larger and more comprehensive. You can find this document on, if you go on the NWCG web page and you Google or search PMS 210, it will come up and you can print it. They are not printing any of these documents. You have to print it yourself if you want a copy. So that's a new one, and it's replacing, the field guide is replacing the Fireline Handbook. So if you've got any of those old red Fireline Handbook 2004, toss that because that is not current anymore. And the work capacity test. So this always generates a certain amount of discussion about who should be tested at certain levels. If you look at the current Resource Advisor Guide, which is 2004, the NWCG identifies light as the suggested minimum standard. So what this says to me, there is kind of wishy-washy wording with suggested, but what it says to me is that it's direction to FMOs who are signing red cards saying we don't need this person to be arduous for the most part. We think that generally people will serve the position at light or moderate fitness levels. I do know that there are some exceptions, which I think are really important because there are probably a handful of people around the nation who are arduous tested and they're resource advisors, and those people always have other qualifications on their red card, and it's important for those people to be engaged in their other qualifications, so it carries into their read and bear positions as well. So this is just this table with the levels of fitness and the distance, weight, time can be found in the Red Book in Chapter 13 on page 10. And if you are doing the arduous fitness level, you are also going to be required for a physical exam, and I think that's once every 3 years. I'm going to get a little bit more into this as we go along here. So this is a shot of Nelson's red card, and things I just want to point out here is that the things that you need to identify here is that it's got the name of the employee, their location, the date of the refreshments and fitness levels, their qualification level, their list of qualifications beyond just the bear and read thing. So if there would be other, like if Nelson was a division soup, you'd see that up on that qual positions section as well. And most importantly, the FMO signature at the bottom. So when your FMO signs this, they're saying that yes, I believe and I've been provided with information that this individual is qualified to serve in these positions. So it's really important to make a connection with your FMO, because going back to the THSP positions, we don't have any strict guidelines and qualifications for serving in those positions. So it makes it a little harder for the FMO. The FMO, they don't have just like a task book that have all signed off and say, okay, this person's qualified. They did their task book. Everybody else signed off through all these different tasks. Good to go. We are not in that position. So you have to take a little extra time to build that relationship with your FMO to make them comfortable with your level of qualification that you're asking him to sign off for, because it's his professional name, and potentially they're liable for it. I mean, FMOs will take this very seriously, and they should. So please, I'm not going to harp too much on this, but just make sure that you've got that relationship going so that there's a good confidence level when you ask them to sign it. So this is a shot of the resource ordering and status system, the ROS system that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Many of our concepts are designed to keep the employees safe and accounted for, and this is one of the tracking systems, and this is really important. People tend to think about ROS as like, how can they reach me, how can they get a hold of me, and how can I get an assignment because I really want an assignment. That's great, but it also tracking you through the entire assignment to make sure that you're being taken care of at a higher level from the incident even. So this is really important information. You've got Nelson's name, and you've got his organization. He's in the Pac West, and his home dispatch. That's really important. If you are entered into ROS and you move to a different job, make sure that you change all these things, the home dispatch especially, because otherwise you won't be able to track, the resources won't be able to track you down. The list of qualifications, they can only order you under one of these qualifications that are identified here. So if I call Nelson, I say, hey Nelson, I really want you to come over here as a hydrologist specialist because I know you can do it. And I call Ross. Ross will be a little. I'll dial in Ross and I'll call the dispatcher, and they'll go in and they'll say we can't reach him under that task or that job because they don't have that qualified in their qualifications. So list in their qualifications. So make sure that you list your qualifications and make sure when someone calls you for a name request that you identify to that person what your qualifications are so that they can make sure that they can reach you under one of those qualifications. The next circle shows that he is unavailable, but he's not on an incident. If you want to accept an assignment, if you've been talking to someone about a name request, make sure that you change your status because, again, nobody can reach you if you're listed as unavailable in ROS. And finally, make sure that you've identified your primary contact information with the radio button to the first one. So make sure that you've got all those things listed in the priority order so that they don't have to get down to the fourth way to contact you. It's much better if they can contact you the first time. So keep that current. And many of you are probably not managing your own ROS profile. Some of us are, like regional national office and some parks. People manage their own profiles and they status themselves. If you status yourself, just make sure you stay on top of things. If you don't status yourself, make sure that you are providing the information to the person who's switching your status. The next one I'm going to touch on briefly is the boot stipend. The boot stipend is for $100 that may be available. I want to emphasize that may because it's not an entitlement. It's you have to talk to your FMO and make sure that they will approve it because that is their call, the FMO's call on it. If your assignment requires arduous or moderate fitness, then you are qualified to apply for it. If you're light fitness, that's not the case. You're not qualified for the boot stipend. If you do this, you have to be providing for your assignments with boots that meet NWCG standards. And there is a DOI fire boot stipend memo, April 30, 2012, and Rich just sent me this morning with a new memo that came out on boot stipend, and it's basically the same, but it's an updated memo. And the NWCG boot standards can be found again in the Red Book on page Chapter 7, page 9, and it's like I think it's 8-inch high Vibram or Vibram-like soles. Alaska has some different qualifications, but that's primarily what it is. So again, coordinate with your FMO if you're going to be applying for this. The medical standards and fitness levels, the light and moderate testing require completion of the health screening questionnaire. And if you answer yes on this questionnaire, it triggers the requirement of a medical exam. That's just the way that it is. I'm not saying make sure that you answer no, anything like that. But if you do say yes, it is going to trigger that requirement. Some positions, which I already talked about, are identified by FMOs as arduous, whether it's because you have other qualifications beyond Bear and Reed positions that require arduous, or for whatever reason your FMO wants to have you be arduous, then you will have to do a medical exam every 3 years, and the health screening questionnaire will have to be completed on those off years. And again, if you answer yes, it will trigger that that medical exam. And if you say yes on the health screening questionnaire, you can't take your PAC test until that's resolved. So don't show up with that to that PAC test with your health screening questionnaire with yes. If you're going to check yes, then you have to have that resolved before you actually show up for the PAC test. And the last slide that I have is document. I think Rich talked about it a little bit with the Whiskeytown slides. Lots of unsuccessful doser lines. All these different kinds of things happen on incidents that, we try to do something and it doesn't work, so they back off and try a different approach. As a resource advisor and as a Bear team member, it's really, really imperative to make sure that you document everything that you see out there so that it can be addressed in all the different ways that need to be addressed before everything is totally turned back to the park. Because there's nothing worse than working for a park, going out, implementing a bear project or something, identifying some problem that wasn't taken care of during the incident. So that is responsible for everybody, the documentation, but as a resource advisor and as a Bear team member, that will be one of the primary jobs that you really have to stay on top of is the documentation, and then providing that documentation back to the park and to the incident command team to make sure that those resolutions can be determined. And I think now I am going to so Nelson, I'm not sure. Do I need to? Are we doing questions right now?
Yeah,
go through that.
Pause for questions. We've got a lot of questions and comments.
Okay.
That we cover. Got a couple of hands raised too. The first one was by Caitlin Johnson, and she actually did that during my presentation, and I missed that. So Caitlin, if you still have a question, let me know. Send a text in the chat box. Reply to the question, or reply to what I just sent you. And if you want to verbally ask that question, let me know, and I'll unmute you. And the other one is Gwen Gerber. So both of you have your hand raised right now, and then I'll go ahead and start answering the questions while those two let me know if they want me to unmute them. The first one is a comment. It's saying that in the Midwest region, they're requiring a PD amendment for moderate fitness level. And
so whoever asked that question, send me an email and I'll send you the memo. And again, if you want to talk to your HR people, you can ask them to look at, I'm trying to think of any, I think it's HR memo 13-01, but I can send you that document as well. So if you want to send me an email, I can send it back out.
Okay. I've got the name.
Okay.
Lisa introduced a lot of concepts that we don't have time to really go into detail on. She talked about the resource ordering system, which the acronym is ROS. She talked about the Red Book, and that's a policy document that is interagency used by all 5 of the bureaus. It's paperback form. It's the size of a novel, and it's updated every year, but it's also available online. And what it's called is the Interagency Standards for Fire and Fire Aviation. That's the formal title, but in the fire community, we commonly just call it the Red Book. And for these webinar invitations, I sent a list of common fire web links. And one of those web links is to the Red Book. It's also available at nifc.gov, NIFC.gov. That stands for the National Interagency Fire Center, and you can drill down to it that way too. But if you need that list of links, send me an email, and I'll send it back to you. She talked about the Incident Response Pocket Guide, that every firefighter or person going out onto the fire line should be carrying that. It's got a lot of good information that is operational in nature that covers safety. So you should get a copy of that. And I'll cover this in the last comment, but she also mentioned the incident qualifications and certification system. This is where all your qualifications are housed. It's an online system. And then we've got a lot of questions on medical standards. And the people that can help you get onto these systems is your fire management officer. And we use acronyms a lot, and I apologize for that. FMO is your fire management officer. Every unit has an FMO assigned to them. For the larger parks, they're going to have their own fire management officer. But for some smaller units like national monuments, there's going to be one assigned to them. It's usually an FMO from a larger park. So talk to them, and they'll walk you through these documents, get you an IRPG. They'll help you get into the qualification system, and then get you into ROS. So now I'll go through the questions now. Lisa, why don't you go ahead and answer this one? When you showed the slide with all the different acronyms, what we call mnemonics, for THSP, there were some with para at the beginning of the name?
Right.
You want to tell them what that is?
So that's a probably an old terminology. The Park Service, I don't know if any park units still use this, but there was a time, probably more than 10 years ago, when parks were able to develop para programs for cultural resources, like para archaeologists. So it was like a 40-hour training for someone who's not an archaeologist, who can do like collateral duty to help with surveys or whatnot. I saw that used with the Forest Service probably 20 years ago, and that was the last time. I haven't seen it for the Park Service use ever for fire.
Okay. They're usually people without
degrees. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. There's a comment as far as the IS 700 course, and this is a course that is available online through FEMA, and it talks about the incident command system. And the comment is that it's probably the most important course that you need to take these days, because it looks like you can't even get a red card anymore unless you've taken IS 700. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to take the class, so we stress that you should take this one. There's a comment here as far as resource advisors that some teams will not allow a read. Well, we go into a lot more depth in our resource advising classes on how to do human engineering. And this is something that the park superintendent should put into the delegation of authority. And what that is, that's a document that allows the incident management team to take over the management of a fire on a particular jurisdiction. They need to stress that you will use resource advisors, and oftentimes will even provide a name in that document. so that the incident management team knows who to contact. So if they're not allowing resource advisors, that is wrong. Anything you want to say, Lisa?
Yeah, at least in the Intermountain region, almost all of our fire management plans identify it in the plan itself, saying that resource advisors will be dispatched with extended attack situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next question several questions have to do with the resource ordering system, or ROS. And the first one is a comment or a question: is that accessible to individuals or just through the fire management officer? And every fire management officer is going to handle this differently. I think everybody that is an instructor today has the password profile to be able to do their own resource ordering as far as toggling availability. However, some parks and their fire management officers, you have to go to them to do that. And so if you're going to be gone for the weekend or something like that and you're not going to be available, you're going to have to tell the person who handles ROS for you. It's oftentimes a dispatcher, but the fire management officer can tell you who that is. It may be the FMO themselves, and they'll actually manage that for you and not give you that profile. So it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Again, it's a question you're going to ask a fire management officer that services your park unit. There was actually 4 questions in relation to that one. There's a question: are you required to have a position in resource management to join the BEAR team? I would say no. It depends on your skills more than your position. So there are folks like in maintenance that help us a lot in the implementation of the treatments and become parts of the BEAR team. They often do not handle the resource qualifications. Somebody's asking me who's the fire management officer for WASO, and which is the Washington office. Why don't you contact me directly, and I'll ask you, or I'll point you the right direction on that one. Several questions as far as who is the fire management officer for their particular unit. And again, why don't you contact me directly after the call or send me an email? That'd be the easiest way to handle this. And I've got a directory of all the fire management officers in the National Park Service. It's going to be harder for me to answer that question for people that are on this call that are outside of the Park Service, but I should be able to find the right person for you if you work for the Park Service. And a lot of questions on work capacity tests and fitness levels as far as arduous qualifications. Lisa, do you want to cover that? Okay. Are you required to have the READ qual or to have the arduous to be a resource advisor? No, absolutely not. In fact, because there are a lot of things going on, and Nelson will touch on a little bit further into his presentation, but because of the PD amendments and the medical standards and the new requirement for seasonal health insurance for firefighters, all those things are coming into play with determining what fitness level resource advisors should be testing for. If you go back purely to what the need is for the job, go back to the resource advisor guide and identifies light fitness. I think moderate is fine as well. I don't have any problem with that because I like knowing that people can walk out
walk out on the fire line. I think it's really important to remember that if you are not a single resource qualified person, which means that you've gone through things like division soup, other pretty high level qualifications. If you haven't done that, you really have no business walking on the fire line all by yourself. And that's a really key piece for me. So if you're going to have to be accompanied with someone, I'm not sure if arduous is really that important to you at that point, because you're not the single resource qualified. That is an arduous position. If you're not qualified, then, if you're going to be walking around with another crew or someone who's keeping tabs on you, making sure that you're walking with you or in the same vicinity in case something blows up, I think that it's kind of a false security by thinking that you can walk around on that fire line by yourself without having that qualification. And that's a safety concern.
Right. It's very important. We would prefer to have you possess those basic qualifications to be what we call a firefighter type 2, so that you can work independently on the fire line without being escorted. But if you have a skill set that is very critical on how we do business, not having the arduous work capacity test and not being a firefighter type 2 is not a deal breaker. We can take you out onto the fire line, but we have to escort you. And the person that escorts you needs to have a certain level of qualifications themselves. Typically, they're single resource boss qualified or higher in the operations side of ICS. So we get asked these questions a lot, and there's probably still a lot of confusion. And so, I think the best thing for you to do to answer these questions for yourselves is to have that dialogue with your fire management officer, or call me,
or to call your regional bear and or read coordinator.
Right. So I've got another question as far as requirements to be on a bear team or a resource advisor. Do you have to be a permanent employee? And the answer is no. We take seasonal employees, intermittents, furlough, and then even if you're not in the federal service, we can hire you under the emergency authority. And as far as required commitment, again, these teams are built as ad hoc organizations. And so if we reach out to you to be on a bear team and you're not available, there's no shame in that. So we're not requiring that you be available for 2-week periods throughout the summer. People have lives, we understand that. And it's just the way we do business for the local and regional ad hoc teams. Now, as we ramp up and get to the national team, we do require a little bit more of a commitment. But most of the people on this call are going to be built from that ad hoc organization. And yep, I got a couple of hands raised. So the first one is Joanne. If you're ready, I'm going to unmute you. Joanne, are you ready to talk? Okay, I'm not hearing anything from her.
Joe did send me an email, and Joe, I got that. I will, after this webinar, I'll pull those slides out and send them to you.
Okay. And the next one is Gwen, and she just lowered her hand, and I think we're good to go to the next segment. So there's a lot of questions still coming in, and I'll start answering those ones while we go over to Nelson. So Nelson, you're good to go.